Welcome back to the Krown crypto channel. Wishing you a happy and healthy start on this nice, relatively warm Saturday morning over here from Helsinki, Finland. I do want to follow up on the short-term time frame analysis as we once again got the bounce that we were looking for in the last 24 hours. It's been the same damn play for the last week basically, and not to toot my own horn, but that has been rather steady. So what does that essentially mean for the weekend that we're here at right now, and what sort of other other market dynamics can we be looking for to give a bit of a bias on this current market that we're looking for on Bitcoin and by extension all cryptocurrency assets, well, for the most part basically. So we'll get into that today. First, I'll start it off with the short-term timeframes, and then we'll mosey our way on over into some more interesting stuff. And with that said, let's just get into it right now, waste no more time. So basically for the last week, we've been working off this chart right here. It's been the same thing the whole damn way through. Basically Bitcoin, down around 38,500, essentially looking for bounces, and between about $39,500 to $40,000 has been the target reach. And we've got this once, twice, and about 3 times yesterday as well. So ultimately, the same move has been playing out. And what does that essentially mean for myself or as far as this analysis goes? Really don't have too much to add on to it. There are a few new things to be aware of in the short-term timeframes right here. But basically, as long as Bitcoin's above 38,500 on a 4-hour closure, I do look for this one to essentially, probably do the same thing. And I would move down now the short-term timeframe resolution to the upside with targets up to about 41 and about $200 to about 41,500-ish region, with an hourly closure above 40,200 or a 4-hour closure above about 39,900. If one of those two criteria is met, yes, I'm essentially looking for that move to transpire. So another couple $1,000 or $1,000 to $2,000 to the upside, with potential for more. Personally speaking, I actually do think that would be a little bit more of a formality, and Bitcoin very likely does beget the next major leg of continuation for the short-term timeframes up to the the higher term timeframe range here, highs, which would be about $44,500 to $45,000, which has much more important implications for the higher term timeframes. By the same token, to the downside, I'd still be looking at the same sort of criteria being met, in the sense that Bitcoin closing an hourly below about 38,200, let's say, to the downside. And yes, I do look for another move down, actually a little bit, not as, this is a little bit too lenient right here, be more around about $37,000. Which puts Bitcoin on the precipice of potentially a major breakdown, or a 4-hour closure basically below the same region as well, but we could say about 38,500 in this case. Until then, I'm actually looking probably for the same thing as I have been for the past week here, short-term bounce, and then the question is, does Bitcoin get above a critical region or not, which again, for the hourly is 40,200, or 4-hour would be about 39,900. Be getting continuation up here. Personally speaking, I do think that Bitcoin would bust on through after a single closure above about 41,500 or so. But hey, that would be a bit more aggressive than I think many people are probably, comfortable with. So do understand that. This is just personal preference here. Anyways, let's talk about the higher term timeframes and how that sort of revolves, or the short term timeframe revolves around that. In the sense, we do still have, for the BULAs, something available here, which would be a reaccumulation formation. We do see a slew of higher lows, thus representing a potential ascending triangle, which would be validated, most importantly, fully validated, I should say, with a move back above 44,500-ish region. That would have a technical target all the way up to $55,000 to $56,000, also in line with the 3.272 Fibonacci extension right here, and would also naturally validate a couple drives of hidden bullish evidence on the weekly right here along the way, which would have essentially a similar target as well, with very low volatility on the weekly BBWP. These all likely coincide with each other for a generalized major move to the upside. If that condition is met, I do think the earliest time to potentially validate the upside, idea or trajectory would be with even a 12-hour or 4-hour closure above the last rejective high that we saw on the 9th of March. That's just above 42,500. If that condition is met, personally speaking, I do think that Bitcoin would fall within that direction. But until then, do keep in mind that below $37,000, and I'm actually going to be changing this now. Before it was about 36,500. Now, as this trend line does rise upwards and onwards over time, naturally, of course, I would be changing this to about $37,000 on a daily closing basis. If that condition is met, I would consider this a resolution to the downside, and very likely a major move to the macro cycle low, or sorry, not the macro cycle, but the macro range lows, which is between about 29,500 to 30,000, just above $30,000 in this case. Basically, it's blue box territory accelerator right here. Very likely a bounce there, and at that point, you know, that's when I really look for this chart to take over on the monthly and Bitcoin head down ultimately, you know, in the month or two to follow, somewhere around the 55, which I do still think is kind of the worst case scenario on the monthly right here, based off of the monthly MACD crossing to the downside, plus monthly PMAR below the moving average, plus also losing, most importantly, the white 20 simple moving average on this chart, which the prior two conditions have already been met. The white 20 simple condition has not been met just yet. That will be met with a monthly closure below 38,000 bucks or 38,500-ish region. Until then, it's definitely a possibility. And if we do see the daily settle below about $37,000, I'd say that that's very likely front runnable, and over a long enough period of time, you know, the following few months, yeah, I do look for that move to happen. But until then, you know, it's just a possibility, just like the upside as well, awaiting validation. And until then, the only thing to really be doing is in the short-term time frame. So what is most likely to happen here in the short-term time frames yet again? Are we likely to get a bounce, or are we likely to come back down and test around the lows? I do think that Bitcoin is setting up for yet another test, actually, somewhere down around, you know, 38.5, 38.6 or so in the short-term time frames. Looking at a 4 right here, it is starting to lose a little bit of its luster. As far as stochastic momentum goes, we do see 4-hour stochastic momentum is actually about to head north with any sort of a closure above 38.8. That will be confirmed in 3 hours, 39 minutes and 56 seconds. So it's quite some time from the, you know, from this moment. That's an eternity in the lower term time frame life. Looking at a 3 hour right here, what do we see? We do see it's actually technically up right now. Remains to the upside as long as Bitcoin's above 38,600. Bi hourly is showing upside above 38.8, and hourly is going to be up above about 38.9. So we see a lot of things have pivoted essentially just below $39,000. I'd say that, you know, Bitcoin kind of teetering right there right now. It doesn't bode exactly super well for the short-term timeframes here. But even if that is met, I'm just looking for another retest somewhere back down around our current lows. And then the same sort of criteria does apply for a continuation to the daily lows. So that'd be the $37,000 target, which I don't know if we already went over in this video, although we've gone over it so many times that you never know. But so many times in the past week, but that would be confirmed, at least in the way they look at things, with either a 4 hour closure below about 38,400 and hourly below about 38,200. If one of those two conditions is met, I do look for Bitcoin to essentially come down and test around at, you know, somewhere around the top end of this blue box right here. That obviously would put Bitcoin in a bit of a precarious position to actually fully break down and resolve this range to the downside. Until then, I do think that it is worth knowing that right now 4 hour BBWP is on the lows. Actually, we are in single digit percentiles, similar to what we saw in the 6th of this month and also the 3rd of this month. Both of these were pretty significant moves, both to the upside and the downside. So in this case, what I'd like to do then is I'd like to look at volatility in alignment with momentum from in this case, a stochastic perspective, and say that, hey, you know, as long as we see Bitcoin still remain above, especially, you know, these pivots right here, I guess, I guess a quick wick down plus a closure above about $39,000 keeps the short-term, hopium alive, at least for the BULAs, that we're a little bit more likely to try another bounce somewhere up in the, somewhere up around basically, $39,500 to $40,000 again. But that's not, again, the same thing as a range resolution here. The only way that I constitute a short-term range resolution to the upside is, again, an hourly above 40,200 or 4 hour above about 39.9. Until then, it should also be known that the daily stochastic momentum will actually turn up above $40,000. Again, adding kind of fuel to that fire, that if Bitcoin does start to inch its way back above there, that'd be a really good early indication that we will see the upside move happen rather than the downside. Anyways, what about 12 hour? 12 hour is going to be nosediving below 40,800. So just ignore that one if you want to be bullish, because that is not the best look right there. And in the 5-day, obviously did close below the resolution point at 39.5 yesterday for 5 days stochastic momentum. It should, however, it is a little bit more enlightening to see the number now come down all the way to 38,330 here. So that does mean that as long as Bitcoin essentially remains above that region, which is, our short-term time frame lows, that will naturally reset yet again, and with very, very low 5-day HVP, the next expansion of that very likely is, the break, whether it be to the upside or the downside. So if you do see coming into the next closure, Bitcoin essentially still remaining above that region, or especially, more is better in this case, that would be another good indication that you're going to see the upside emerge rather than the downside. And it's going to be quite severe, similar to what we saw back on over here in early May of last year. This one obviously coming to the downside, but these were comparable levels of volatility before that move transpired. And that was a 50% move to the downside, obviously. So it's not, volatility is direction neutral, obviously, but basically we're talking about a severe move, essentially. Anyways, we are 10 minutes into this video. I think it's now time to speak about some other things that I think can really add some color on this market. There are a few counterpoints to this, obviously, but I want to bring up here first and foremost Dixie. This is a chart that we've been looking at for a long time. I haven't spoken about it too much in the last month and a half, but this is a quarterly, obviously, so it's not really that relevant on like a day-to-day basis. But we have hit our long-term target here based off of the breakout that we identified in October of 2021. All the way up to just about $100. It hasn't quite hit there exactly just yet. 99.418 is the is the high thus far. So I do think you probably get another maybe slight move up somewhere just above $100 or so, and then very likely a short-term pullback from there. Problem is that long-term, I'm actually looking for this to have major continuation as we said, was likely, of which that is being based off of the drive of hidden bullish evidence right here, alongside a higher low on the macro, alongside incredibly low, the second lowest, or sorry, among the lowest BBWP reads that we've seen on the quarterly ever. I'll remind you that the last time we saw it this low was back here in July 2014. That was before this major move up from $80 to about a little bit above $100. So long term, I'm actually looking for this to move well above $100, probably towards $110, maybe even maybe $115 over a long enough time period. But that can take years. This is a quarterly after all. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is, well, first I should talk about why this, there's a few counterpoints to this. Obviously, Dixie is the dollar's value relative to a basket of other fiat currencies. It's not literally related to asset prices. So I think a lot of people get that wrong, but you can backtest the general long-term trend of this versus risk on assets. And it's good enough, I'd say, to where it's worthwhile enough to be aware of, is what I'd say. So generally bullish on this. I still remain bullish on this. Shorter term, maybe after one more spike up to new highs in this run, somewhere around just, maybe above $100, I am looking for that to pull back, however, because, once you hit a technical target like this, and you also do see, these are, macro range highs on very high term timeframes, very likely going to see a pullback from there. So when does that happen? Probably around end of month, maybe early Q 2022, something like that. So I would say that generally gives risk on assets a reprieve. It would be kind of the general idea. But yeah, long term, I'm still massively bullish on this, and it's not really any real reason to change it. And also, we can go look at NASDAQ as well, representing the tech and financial sector, of which Bitcoin kind of acts as like a tech growth asset. And for what it's worth, on Friday, this one had an absolutely abysmal closure, which really, this is a very, very weak closure right here, which opens up the likelihood, not just the possibility, but a likelihood that we will see another gap down to open up next week, whether it be late Sunday, as futures open up for trading, or whether it's like actually on New York Stock Exchange open on Monday. I don't really have a strong opinion on, but ultimately I do think that this one is getting ready for another leg down. Actually, no real reason for me to be, looking at anything resembling a reversal in this, as long as you're now below about 14,300, and long term, I guess over the next couple months, probably looking somewhere towards mid 12,000s region before the next sort of major bounce. But yeah, pretty ugly right there on that top. We do see many drives of bearish divergence, which we identified months ago. Now, slowly but surely playing out. So I think that this is a good time to kind of come back to this chart and just, show, hey, over time, yeah, they do play out. It just takes a lot of patience when you trade in a monthly, right? Long term, I do think that this one could, long term, I don't know, it might take like a year or two, but do you think that it could come down to mid 11s, low 11s, something like that? And, that's probably where I could maybe potentially see a low, but I mean, it's a hell of a chart right there, right? Especially when you put it on linear scale, which is how we really should be looking at it. So, yeah, not great, man, not great. So does Bitcoin go down with a ship like that? Maybe. Again, we haven't really seen too much too much evidence that Bitcoin, doesn't trade with NASDAQ or the techs in general. I know that some people are going to say, but Krown, don't you see that Bitcoin right here, or sorry, NASDAQ right here is doing something completely different than Bitcoin? Yes, but here's the thing is that you could just say that Bitcoin already played out its major downside move. NASDAQ's now kind of following with it. and now the world is back in order, I guess. But ultimately, this would be making me lean a little bit more on the bearish side as well. But then again, at the end of the day, you have to trade the asset that's in front of you. That's kind of one of the things that, one of the things that my mentor really hammered into my own mind. So in this case, I'd simplify, go back around here. It's quite literally the same damn chart as what we've been seeing before. Bitcoin above 40,200 on an hourly. Looking for a continuation up to 41.2 to 41.7-ish region. Personally speaking, any sort of a even medium-term time frame closure around here, I very likely think that things do continue upwards and onwards towards this blue box territory. That would really make this start to look like a long-term weekly reversal, actually, if that were to happen, confirming that 2 drives of hidden bullish evidence, plus very likely a range resolution on the higher-term timeframes with major targets up in the following week towards the mid to upper $50,000 territory. In this case, to the downside, below about 38.3, 38.4 on a 4-hour closure. And I do look for the $37,000 region to be tested yet again, or an hourly below about 38.2, same thing. And any sort of a daily closure below 37-ish, we'll say, is where I start to look at this one as resolved to the downside. Very likely retesting, macros range lows, that is. Very likely going to be a bounce along the way at about 34.5, let's say, 35,000 bucks, but probably just that. Ultimately finds its way down here for another anemic bounce, and then long term probably does play at that long term downside move. But yeah, a rather uneventful week. But as far as trading goes, I mean, sometimes it's just gonna be like that. And well, just another humble reminder that got that trade like many times and it was fine. So take it as you will. I'll be signing off now, and with that said, take care. See you hopefully soon.